I'm in my zone.
Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for Hitman Absolution for the PlayStation 3. And I've heard some complaints from a few reviewers stating that this title just doesn't feel like what a Hitman game should, suggesting that it's either watered down or mainstream and just cashing in on the Hitman license. This might be a bit of a bold statement, but I've played the older Hitman titles more than a lot of these big name reviewers have, and I know this because I've played those games to death, pretty much an unhealthy amount of hours logged into the previous titles, because I really enjoyed the way the game allowed you to take your own approach to situations. So if anyone would be overly critical of this new version, it would be me, and I absolutely flat out love this game. I think they made some very awesome decisions to upgrade a few parts of the gameplay to please a few different types of gamers while keeping the core experience intact. I do have a few nitpicks, but it's not going to stop it from being one of my favorite games that's released in 2012. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the review. I have two complaints with this game, one of which is with the cutscene graphics. They're pretty rough around the edges to say the least. I saw a lot of very strange things happening, such as texture pop-ins and just twitchy graphics. The character movement and the facial animations can also be pretty stiff. However, the actual gameplay ran great. I didn't notice a single problem or issue with the frame rate while I was playing, even under circumstances that there were dozens upon dozens of moving characters on the screen at once that would normally chug up most games. The game world is pretty dark and shady, but with a Hitman title you really wouldn't want it any other way. There's a total of 20 stages, and I say most were absolutely perfect, but you will run across a few that felt like they were a bit out of place or just tossed in at the last minute to extend the game an extra hour or two.
Hey! You talking to yourself again? Man, I worry about your sanity sometimes.
Here comes the other nitpick or complaint, and that is with the story itself. The characters, especially the villains, were absolutely phenomenal. Certain parts of the story feels like it was pulled straight out of one of the great Kill Bill movies, but the actual plot and how the game gives an excuse to travel to different locations was pretty lackluster, to say the least. Agent 47 also manages to get out of a few situations that's going to make your eyes roll, and I did completely lose interest in the story about halfway through. I knew I was trying to protect and save some girl, but I really just wanted to get back to doing what Hitman does best, and that's eliminating anyone and everyone in my path. But if they were able to pull every scene out of this game and try to turn it into a movie, it would have a few awesome set pieces, a few intense moments, but overall it would be a pretty lousy movie. That's just my take on it. If you're going to play this game, expect to do a lot of this, and that. There are times when you have to be overly patient and other times when you have to flip the switch and be ready to go on a rampage, and it's suspense leading up to these really intense gunfights that keeps things interesting, keeps you compelled to want to keep playing, knowing that any small mistake or slip up will lead into a full-on assault complete with the enemy calling for backup. It's those moments when you're pinned down and overwhelmed that can lead to some quick deaths if you're not completely prepared with a good amount of ammo. You really have to observe your surroundings and plan out what you're going to do well before you take action. The controls and gun game should please anyone that enjoys shooters, as the trigger squeeze mechanic that I raved about in the first impressions video really helps bring some realism to the gunfights. For those that didn't watch that video, this game measures how much you squeeze down on the right trigger to close in your crosshair, so if you're not in a frantic gunfight you can take your time and get a pinpoint accurate shot. This is one portion of the game that I can see other titles copying down the road. The enemy artificial intelligence on this game reminds me of some of the old-fashioned horror movies in which the bad guy would just be slaughtering people by the dozens. The entire cast of the movie knew exactly what the deal was, and yet they would make the dumbest decisions available in a feeble attempt to try to stay alive. In this game's case, you can murder guards by the dozens, and the guys alive don't really seem too concerned with the fact that the patrols around them are disappearing, and they always go to inspect thrown objects or triggered car alarms. I think if I noticed that my buddies Bill, Fred, and Jim have all mysteriously just vanished from their post, I would back myself into a corner with my gun loaded and ready in the fire position instead of going to inspect some strange noise in a dark, unlighted corner of a room. But that's just me. In all seriousness though, the AI on the game does handle most situations pretty well. Once they realize that you're around, they'll flank you, they'll take cover once things hit the fan, and the enemy positioning patterns and their line of sight are things that you have to study and worry about. Rarely did I notice them do something creative or unusually different than what the other 100 guards that I just murdered did, so once you learn the basics of how to take down your prey, you're pretty much set for the rest of the game. It falls in line with other titles like Splinter Cell, in which the goal is to try to stay out of sight and move through the stages as quietly as possible. But if you don't like that style of gameplay, or if you lose your patience, you can shoot your way through almost all of the stages. Just don't expect to score very high among your friends or the worldwide leaderboards, as it penalizes you heavily for ramboing your way through the stage. This game kind of feels like a Christmas present to myself. It was a year filled with grinding through some average and subpar games, with a few good ones along the way, only to make it to the very end and actually have one that I can spend some quality and fun time with over the next few weeks. Even outside of my own preference and gaming taste, I think this is a must-buy game if you even remotely enjoyed any of the previous titles in this series. One subscriber commented that they don't understand why the game received a few mixed reviews when the gameplay just looks so awesome. If your gut instinct tells you, hey, this game looks pretty good, I don't see what people are complaining about, then go with your gut instinct. There is no hidden surprise that ruins the experience or some nagging issue that needs to be addressed. If you think the game looks fun, then go pick it up. It's one of the best titles that's released this year. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.
We lost him.